Just to both of you, what's your favourite memory of Brian Clough?
I'll let you answer that one first, Trevor. Well, I think.
I'm stuck. I don't know what to say. I should be saying, seeing a guy who was incredibly happy, having just won the European Cup for the first time. But I'd be lying if I said that, because he wasn't particularly happy. We didn't play great against Malmo. He saw this as an opportunity to show the world just how good his footballing team was, and we didn't perform to our potential. So it was a rather subdued Brian Clough in the dressing room after the game. But the happiest he's been, I think it was probably about 3 weeks prior to that when Ian Boyer scored a goal in the second leg of the European Cup semi-final. Bearing in mind the team drew the first leg 3-3, and the majority of people wrote Nottingham Forest off. But we went to Cologne, and Ian Boyer scored that all-important goal, which got us into the final and gave me the chance, of course, of making my debut, in a European tie. And I remember that night he was incredibly happy.
Yeah, touching on that as well, the interview he gave to the television afterwards that night. I mean, I usually used to go out for a drink, but I stayed in that night and watched him. And I thought it was really impressive in the interview when he suddenly looked at the camera and said, "I hope nobody's foolish enough to think we're out of this." So that's a very strong memory. Another strong memory I have of him is when the day he first walked in the club. The dressing room was square-shaped, and I was sitting here, and there used to be a door to exit the dressing room and an alcove and then another door. And when he first walked into the club, I always remember him walking around the corner. I couldn't see him around the corner, but when he turned the corner, he rushed in and whipped his jacket off and hung it on a peg. And that struck me because it was like, God, a whirlwind, and this guy really means business. So that was always a strong memory for me.
That's a nice one. And one thing that's very sort of clear from the film is just how much football's changed. I mean, it's a real reminder of how dramatically it's changed. What do you think the game's lost and gained over the years? It's quite a big question.
Yeah. I think that it's something that's regularly talked about in football, and that's the dressing room camaraderie. I don't see it as the same now as it was in our time. I think, of course, when you're winning, it's far easier to have a happy dressing room and a greater togetherness. But recently we were invited to the premiere of this film, I Believe in Miracles, and of the 16 who played in the first year of the European Cup, it was only Martin O'Neill that was missing because he was away on international duty with the Republic of Ireland. So everybody was there, and it was just fantastic, the bond, as if like we'd never been away. Of course we'd been away. It'd been over 30 odd years since we'd seen each other, and I think this was the first time that we'd all come together in the same room since that final in Munich in 1979. And I think that, for me, that's the biggest change. You have to remember that the team, the Nottingham Forest team, was made up of Englishmen, Scots. Martin O'Neill was Irish. There were no foreign players. That's taken nothing away from foreign players because they've added something, in terms of their technical ability to the English game. But I think it was far, far easier in them days, to get that togetherness with a group of British guys.
I think players like Trevor, for instance, and centre forwards in our day, I would think it was harder for them than it is nowadays. Simply because you can't get tackled now. In their days, they used to sometimes get the back of the legs and things like that. But now that's completely outlawed. The benefit of the game is probably another thing because of that is that forwards are allowed to express themselves a bit more now, because one tackle is a yellow card, the next one's a red one. So that's a big difference, I'd say. But well, if you ask me, could good players now play then, and good players then play now? I would say, of course, they could. The best players in any generation could play in any era.
I'm often asked too, are you envious of, the top players these days, their earning power? And absolutely not. What I am envious of is, or are the conditions in which they play in every game. Because when I look back on some of the footage of the City Ground at Nottingham, and there were numerous other grounds where, for us to have played the football that we played is quite remarkable on those conditions. I mean, now, every pitch in the Premier League is in immaculate condition. You wouldn't know whether it was August at the start of the season or the second week in May when the season's ending, because every game you play on a brilliant, immaculate surface. That's what I would have enjoyed more than anything.
And looking back at Munich, how do you still feel about that moment?
How do I
Munich
feel?
match? Yeah.
I still feel that it's been the greatest moment in my footballing career, and I never get tired of talking about it or watching it. It was always, I was always instructed by Brian Clough when I played on the right-hand side, to make sure that when John had possession of the ball, to get to that back post, because whenever he had it, 9 times out of 10, he would go past the fullback and deliver a ball into the box. And when Ian Boyer played that ball out to John, I was loitering in the middle of the park with a lot of ground to make up. So I had to sort of, get my skates on to make sure that when that ball got to John, I'd be there at the back post, for when it came in. And it was just a wonderful moment because it was on the stroke of half-time. We had not played particularly well. It probably changed the half-time team talk, made it slightly easier for the players to hear what Brian Clough had to say rather than what he would have said if we'd gone in at 0-0. But when the ball came over, I had to make good contact with it, with my head. I was never as assured with my head as I was with my foot, so I had to concentrate and make sure I headed it, and I got it right. And then as I came off the field, I fell into the discus circle. And that's a question I'm often asked, did you suffer any damage? Did it hurt? Well, it didn't hurt because the discus area was actually made of rubber.
And it was well known, sort of, you used to smoke, and you stopped that and things like that. But in the movie, obviously, there's footage of smoking sort of quite close to the matches and things like that. What do you think back on that now? Because I'm quite a heavy smoker, and it's sort of.
Well, I wish I hadn't started. I started for silly reasons. I don't really want to go into it to do with personal things that made me, I got started. So I wish I'd never done it, but once I did do it, I enjoyed it. But I don't think it affected me while I was fit, but I think it would have done. Having said that, I quit 2 years ago, but having said that, I played a lot of tennis in the last 10 years and it didn't really seem to affect me that much. But obviously, it's not good for you.
But there were a number of guys who smoked in football. I touched on this now. I played at Sampdoria. If you said to me, who were the best players at Sampdoria, I would straight away say Gianluca Vialli. And he smoked, but great player.
I was really interested in the film that the training regimes and the idea of sort of the amount of off time you had. That's not something that exists as much these days. Do you think that's a loss?
Yeah, I do. I think our manager at the time was a firm believer in rest. He thought that the season was hard enough. We did all our work in pre-season, you would say, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
We worked really hard. But once the game started, he gave us as much rest as we possibly could. We'd always have a day off after the game, and we would do not very little on the day of a game. So we had plenty of time to rest. And I think you need a break from football. Even if you just go home and spend the time with the wife and your kids, even pottering around the house, you still need a break from it.
Because you had to be fresh, not just in the legs, but you had to be fresh in the mind. And that's what Brian Clough was a great believer in. You know, I see the modern day coaches now talking about, you know, when he selects a side for Saturday, he makes his judgment on what he's seen, you know, throughout the week on the training field. Well, I had a spell in management. You know, I was in management for 12 years, and I would never, ever select a player because he had done particularly well in training, or if a player had done particularly poor in training. You know, it was all about, for me, what you do on a match day.
Absolutely.
You know, we've all got our different little routines. You know, for example, on a Friday, I would never like to play a five-a-side. Now, the majority of players like to have a five-a-side on a Friday, the day before a game. But I was already thinking on a Friday morning about Saturday. I didn't want to risk getting injured. I didn't want to sort of, you know, expend any unnecessary energy. I was already thinking at 11 o'clock Friday morning about what I'll be doing 3 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon, but we're all different.
Yeah, I mean, I disagree with Trevor there. I liked the five-a-side on Friday, but then that was all I ever did like. I didn't like any other training or running or anything like that, so, because I wasn't very good at it. But I enjoyed the five-a-side.